Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm your host JT, and if this is your first time tuning in, thank you and welcome. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know every time I upload a new video. My guest today is Alan Clark. He is consistently rated as one of the best photographers in the country. His work can be seen on music art, magazines, as well as many celebrity and Fortune 500 companies' websites. With over 25 years of experience in photography, Alan has traveled the world doing what he describes as his dream job. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by him to hear more of his story because every story matters. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thank you for having me.
Alan, I'd love to hear how you got into photography.
It started actually because my mother did not know how. It's not that she didn't know how, she just couldn't execute how to take a decent family photo. It was kind of funny. It started from kind of a sense of humor, and she constantly cut off heads. Like in the old days when we used film and stuff like that. Remember, I'm old. In the old days when we used film and Instamatic cameras and stuff like that, like Kodak Brownies, and I'm not that old, but we had like a little camera called a 110 camera. It was like an instant camera. And I don't think she was aware. Like if you can look at the screen right now, she was constantly shooting like this with her fingers always over the lens. And she just wasn't aware of it. I can remember looking back and just seeing her mitts like over the top of the camera. And she always shot like that. And so we would always make fun of her, like, Mom, take better photos or whatever, or she was making it crooked always like this. Like, she just couldn't get it straight. She couldn't get the camera straight. She couldn't stop from cutting off her heads. And so we made so much fun of her. She finally just kind of handed the camera to me. I might have been 6 or 7 or 8. I'm not real sure. And then kind of appointed me to take the family photos at that point. And so that's kind of how it started, literally, is just from my mom not doing a good job with taking family photos. And so that's how it started for me. And, I remember I've written like in a couple of my little bio lines in the bio description that, once I touched the camera, it just made sense to me. And that's just, I don't know how, even when I wasn't able to talk or, we've discussed, I've talked a little bit, with Craig about this, but like, I don't know what form of dyslexia I had when I was younger, but I had a real hard time with retention.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's part of it, but because I've never been diagnosed, but I know that it was junior high and probably through college, I just couldn't retain whatever I read. It just would not go in for whatever reason.
I understand that with my dyslexia.
Yeah. And I didn't know you tell me, is that a part of that?
Retention is a huge part of it. I don't know the science behind it, but totally, for me, it's not a lot of people think of it as the reversal of letters and things like that. But for me, it was the retention and then the ability to one day, I'd learn a word like the word the, and the next day I'd walk back into the classroom and start reading something and, the word the, I had no idea what it was. And it goes back to that retention.
Makes sense now because I've never asked anyone. I've never been diagnosed and I've never even known anything. Like you said, it wasn't just the way letters were mixed up, even though that was part of it. I took an IQ test. Gosh, it's been probably almost 10 years since I took the IQ test, but it was really sweet. Like I took this IQ test and I took it over and over again because I just was like, man, I feel like I'm smarter than this, And I took the IQ test twice and it was from an online thing. But back then it wasn't so much clickbait, back when I took the test. It was a long time ago and things were still more innocent on the internet. And I took the test twice and finally someone, the company that I took the test with emailed me. And he met, I don't know if he was a doctor or what he was, but he was able to say, hey, you're making the same mistakes every single turn. And he goes, it's like on a word, how a word sometimes, especially English, and they'll have a double meaning or they'll take like everyone, the
Exactly.
whole world usually chooses this way. Well, I was always choosing that way. It was almost like I was going upstream, and whatever everyone's interpretation is of this word, I always took the interpretation to be the other way. I don't know why. And he kept saying, he goes, "You're right. I think," because I wrote back to him and I said, I feel like my score is higher. And he said, "Yeah, you're about 25 points off." So I think I was scoring around at that time, I was scoring around a 115 or 120. And he said, "You're about 20 points off. So you're a lot smarter than you think you are." And he goes, "That's probably been a suspicion for a long time, but you just couldn't, words are not the way." And he just said, that's part of the problem with you, is that words aren't the way. And so what's weird is with that is as a problem because of that, when I was younger in junior high, I bought my first camera by the time I was 15. I think that, the camera was my translator.
For me, like my big moment that, I really took like the dyslexia side of things and the challenges in school. And I call it my like a scapegoat, but like the way I get away from the challenge is by, doing things in the outdoors. And that was always my passion. And
That's amazing.
Imagine photography was your passion early on, and that's what has carried you on to now.
It was a huge part of my imagination when I was younger. We had these little consumer cameras. One was called, like I told you, 110 Instamatic, and I'm talking like these things almost look like spy cameras. They were like this big. And then one was called the disc camera. If you ever seen a disc camera, you have to go look it up. It's crazy. Go Google a disc camera. But Kodak made a disc camera, and the film was on almost like a ViewMaster, old school ViewMaster. It was on a circle, and so the photos were around the circle, around the edge. They were unexposed until they got into the camera somehow, and then it's so weird the way they did this. It was a special thing. They only made it for this one camera called the disc camera, and we had that. And so I took these cameras, and I was obsessed with stunts, Hollywood stuntmen, and obsessed with action, and like every kid, and
yes.
I was obsessed with all these things. And I would take the cameras and I would, like, for instance, I remember specifically me and my friend Robin from across the street, who's now an archaeologist. He would take the photos of me, and I would set everything up. And so I would get on the top of the porch, and I would jump off the porch backwards as if I were, but I would make it look as I was jumping off backwards as if I was jumping up, like up.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I just would stage that. And we did this all the time. We would stage stunts and stage tricks and stuff like that. And they even had a magic show in my backyard. And stuff like, we just had great imaginations when we were younger.
Wow, that sounds like me and my friends just having a good old time jumping off things. So how did your career go from, I know you were in the music industry, but how did it accelerate into the photography side of things?
I thought for the longest time that I wanted to be in or around the music industry. And I think it was just because I grew up in Hendersonville. So all of my friends, Hendersonville's the city, or, Taylor Swift is famous from coming from Hendersonville. That's where she grew up. But before that, there was mostly songwriters and country music stars that lived in Hendersonville, Johnny Cash being one of them. The list goes.
In Hendersonville, is that right outside of Nashville then?
Yeah, 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes north, kind of northeast of Nashville. I went to Beach High School, that was the rival of Hendersonville High School, where Taylor Swift went. But of course, it was, a gajillion years before she ever went through that high school. But so, I grew up with songwriters, kids, and stuff like that. Specifically, I kind of think my junior years in high school, I'd started befriending a lot of friends. I didn't know that they were songwriter kids. It's just, we just kind of worked. A lot of the guys I was hanging out with, my friend Jim Shaun and Chris Bogan and TJ Seals, all of their parents, like Jim's dad was the head of A&R for CBS Records. TJ Seals, my friend TJ, his dad had written songs for everybody from Eric Clapton to Randy Travis, you name it. And so I just kind of grew up around that type of creativity, thinking that was normal. Excuse me. A lot of people don't realize how unnormal that is. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was already familiar with studios and the recording process and stuff like that. Like, had no idea I thought it was cool, but I didn't know that it wasn't normal, and went to junior high. In junior high, I went to school with Johnny Cash's son, John Carter. And so just grew up with that. That was how I grew up. And I just wasn't as good at music as they were. I mean, I had such talented friends that were already songwriters and musicians and incredible musicians at that. And I just it was weird. I kind of had that self, I don't know, check in the mirror. And I just kind of looked and I was like, man, I am just not as good as they are. So I just saw that and I was like, no, I got to pick something else. And so I thought maybe I'll just do music business. And so I kind of went that way, went to school and had an offer from a guy to come, who spoke at the school, come look me up and all this type of stuff. And so I went and looked him up. I was the only one who did it at the university that I went to. And he kind of sent me down that path. I ended up as an agent at the William Morris agency, which was one of the first actually talent agencies. I think their first client was Charlie Chaplin.
Okay.
And that was like, I swear it was like, I remember correctly, the history, it was like 1898. It was like history, total history moment. And so I somehow got into that position by going through 2 other jobs. And I thought that was it for me. I thought I was going to be in the music industry. And I started going down that path, and it was not a great path. It was a kind of a dark path, honestly. A lot of ego, and stuff like that. And I think somewhere along the way, they decided I was in the artist development department there, and they sacked that department, and of course me with it. And I ended up needing a job. And so I started working some other jobs. But this whole time I'd been doing photography. Like I said, I just remembered specifically when I got the job at the William Morris agency, I was like, I went and called all the artists that I worked for, and I said, maybe not now. It was weird. I had this foresight happening, and I just called them all and said, it's probably not gonna stay here. So when this happens, I would love to come back and photograph you guys. And I think I went back and I photographed 2 out of the 5 artists that I worked for. Kevin Welch was one of them. He was a writer from Warner Brothers and just a really interesting looking cat. And so him, and so I went back to a few artists that I'd worked with, and and then started kind of down the road of being a photographer professionally at that point.
And then I know that you have, photographed some awesome people throughout your career and continue to. Could you touch on some of those individuals?
I just did a video yesterday about editing with Photoshop and Instagram and all the types of editing you can do. And I realized how much that applied to how my career path too. But what I was saying yesterday in this video was when you edit, it's a bunch of nerdy stuff, but basically it's called stair-step interpolation, which is basically, they use it for sizing up images, stair-step interpolation. And all these things are built into Photoshop, into the basics of Photoshop, or at least the foundation of Photoshop. But if you look at it, all of Photoshop is based on small incremental moves. You don't do big moves when you edit. Some people do, and what those photos look like when you're on Instagram and social media, and they look like, the sky does not look like that. It's way too much red, exactly. Way too much orange, way too much green. The ocean's not that blue. We all know this. We know this. Now there's some parts of the world where it is, like Greece, the water is ridiculous. And so sometimes, yeah, but not all the water. The lake across over here is not that green, okay? It's just not. And it's like a reality loss, And so I was talking about editing, if you want it to be done right, is done in small incremental moves. And I realized that also is how I moved into this position, was just small incremental moves. You can't see the whole staircase, but you can see the next step type of move. And, going back to those artists, like I told you, everyone that's in my portfolio now is based off of that same, I guess, philosophy, is that I went back to all the artists that I'd worked with, and I just knew that it was going to be, I knew that, yes, you can have great work in your portfolio, but if you don't put somebody in there that they recognize, know, or relate to, at some point, it could just be that out of 10 photos, there's only 2 people in there that are kind of a semi-celebrity, or someone that, everyone in town knows, or whatever. I knew that kind of mentality was going to be the glue that would push me forward, because, you can do great work all day long, but if you don't have something that somebody can identify with, and honestly, that then connects their story to your story. And so that was something I knew. And I don't even know what told me that. I mean, I'd asked for advice and all this kind of stuff, and I knew that other people were giving me advice, probably I just wasn't listening. So I don't know how that's got into my bird brain, but it did. And I just kind of started making those connections and knowing that I needed to kind of put something in my book that other people related to. Because if you just show a person in the book that no one knows, that's one thing. That's a great photo. But then if you put someone in there that everyone knows, then that's like, oh, I know that guy, then
Exactly.
they can actually include their story in it, so that's kind of how that came to be. It was just that mentality that I started with is the same mentality, getting someone that I can shoot today. So that's kind of where it went. And it went literally from like local musician, regional musician, or local celebrity or regional celebrity / musician. And then from there to national and then international. And it just kept growing. But it was those small incremental steps.
It's got to be so rewarding to look back and see, who you've photographed throughout the years from presidents and on.
Yeah, it's been odd, just to say you photographed two presidents, not while they were sitting. Obviously, I didn't shoot photograph. You have to be careful how you say that, by the way. Photograph presidents, not shoot presidents. In fact, I had on the way to the first one, on the way to George Herbert, I had to tell my staff. I had to tell my people. We practiced. I was like, everyone say, photograph the president, photograph the president, photograph. We did it like, I don't know, 20.
You certainly have to choose your words selectively there.
So, going from, local celebrity, local musician to, photographing a president, I listed in my bio as 2 knights, which basically means, people that have been knighted by the Queen. So I know Elton John being one of them, Sir George Martin, the producer of all the Beatles records, being the other. And so I include in that, just other types of people too, but I just have such a respect for the normal, everyday, hardworking people that aren't celebrities. And I'm kind of come to love them, I think, more.
So how do you capture an individual story from shooting sports figures to movie stars to presidents? I can imagine that they all have a pretty big difference in their stories. So how do you capture it?
I think it's just being a good student, not of life in general, but always do research on whoever it is, even if they're not, necessarily a celebrity. It doesn't matter. I'll go to their websites, ask for their songs. I'll look for themes that kind of run through what they're doing. And if they are a celebrity, I do a lot of work. And also, if you think about it, if you have a lot of material that you can go through, there are themes that run through a person's life again and again, like a thread. And I'll look for that thread. I'll look for that connection, something that's really important to them, something that they bring up on more than one occasion, something that may be a charity that they love or give to, something that they've written many times before, like a philosophy or something like that. Maybe they love another philosopher or another writer. And I always look for these little threads and things that run through doing research for people. And so that is the first start. That's usually the first. I need more than an introduction to somebody. I need to know them a little bit more than if possible. And so I'll do that. And then I'll go from there to, I find that connection point. So it's really important for me to find that connection point. So I'll just, this may be the thing that, if you were a Christian, you would say spiritual gift, and it might be that thing that maybe I have more than maybe encouragement or, what's the other one I always liked? Stewardship.
Yeah.
So it's, you know what I mean? So it's more than those things. So like discernment is kind of the thing I feel like I've always had, like an intuition, what to talk about, what to say, being sensitive to the spirit and stuff like that in these types of situations. So it's just been an extra thing, like an extra level, I think. And I honestly think it's been the key to my success, is just finding connection with everyone that I've ever shot. So it's super important to know what that is.
So during your photography, what is like one of the craziest stories that has come out of a shoot?
It's funny because I asked this very question on my own podcast, and I think I've got it's not that I don't have any stories, it's that I have so many, and how do I choose? And like, I think like if I choose this one, then man, I didn't give any credit to that one or something like that. But I mean, to me, there's some crazy stuff that's happened. I remember, there's been times I've been on. There was a shoot once where a mob almost started fighting each other. I was photographing cars for a magazine called Rides Magazine, which it was kind of a rap hip hop magazine that featured cars in the magazine, and it was actually pretty cool. It might still be out there. I can't remember, but there was a little period where I worked for a lot of rap magazines. Double XL, The Source, Rides. The Source had a sports magazine. I worked for them. But I was on a shoot for, I believe it was Rides Magazine, and I was photographing these 3 custom cars that this company had, the small custom company had made. I believe it was in Huntsville, Alabama. And then the people that did the wheels, that custom the wheels, showed up, and they had beef with this place that custom the body of the car. So it was literally, I was at the top of a ladder, and it was a big ladder too, because I was trying to shoot down on the cars. I had a giant Hasselblad camera, Polaroid back, and lights and all this stuff. And I think I had an assistant with me. I can't remember. I think this is one of the rare occasions I might have done it alone. I just can't remember. It's 27 years of photography. You can't remember all the details sometimes. But all of a sudden the ladder started shaking, and it was like I was, doing this because they were about to fight. And I was just sitting there looking like, what am I going to do? And I was trying to put together where's my car? How can I get out of here?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden because they were about to knock me off this ladder, because they were bumping around, shoving and pushing and stuff like that. I just had this moment. I just screamed at the top of my voice, and I said, everybody, I think I said everybody shut up. And then I got everyone's attention, and I literally just had enough. And I was like, I'm trying to do something here. And I said, you guys, the ones that kind of started and showed up, the custom wheel people, I said, you guys need to get in your car and leave right now. And I just took over this whole, I don't know, there had to have been at least 100 people. And I said, you guys are doing pretty good. Like the other guys that were there, I said, you guys are doing pretty good, because they were trying their best not to fight, but the other ones were just totally provoking them. And I said, thank you. I said, you guys leave, you guys stay. Everybody needs to go get away from my ladder right now, because you're about to knock me off this thing.
Don't knock me over.
And it was so weird. And they all just straightened up and listened to me. It was really odd.
It was because you were up on top of the ladder too.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I guess I never thought about that. Maybe that was it. Yeah. I don't know what, and I had a camera, I guess, it's funny because I've said multiple times, I can't tell you how many times having a camera has been more of a soapbox, or not a soapbox, or an icebreaker, I guess, for helping people. I've been in situations where I've done street photography. I've walked around the streets, and people will come up to me. But if that was a Bible instead of a camera, people would have run the other way. And I can't tell you how many times it's been a valuable asset to just trying to help and love on others and heal them, or at least be a part of it. It's been an amazing journey. I've met some amazing people, and you know what? God sends them to me all the time. He sends them to me constantly. I kind of love that.
That's so cool that the camera has been a tool to bring people to you, and it's allowed you, I know, to teach the word. And I know faith's very important to you. Could you touch on your faith in your life?
Absolutely. I grew up in the church. A lot of us do in the South. It's kind of hard not to. They call this the Bible Belt for a reason, but I grew up in the church, and I don't know if the word liturgy, but it's almost like I knew the rules, and I knew the things that man had put on God, but I didn't know God. I knew the fairy tale. I knew the fairy tale. I knew the story. I don't even know if I had read it. I actually just had other people tell me the story, from the time I was probably, 3 to 18. But I didn't really care about God. I didn't really care about the world. I was all kind of into myself. And like most people, when you're that young, you're always kind of self-absorbed. And I just didn't really know or have a relationship with God, and didn't really feel the need to. But as things, kind of came together for me. It's taken me a long time. I'm a work in progress for sure. I met some people that were kind enough to actually share, the truth with me through the years. And one being my friend John Blackstone, who was a Christian musician I'd come in contact with back then. And he kind of taught me how to accept the Lord in my heart. I'd never heard this phrase and honestly didn't believe it. And he just said, you don't have to believe, but you do have to accept it. You do have to say it and kind of, create the, not the deal, but you know what I mean? The contract,
Exactly.
between you and God. And I did it. And, that was one of the greatest moments of my life. I remember he told me, even if you don't believe the words coming out of your mouth, you have to say it anyway. So I did it. And it was, I never went back, from then, once that happened, they always, they talk about how you're kind of sealed with the Spirit, you're sealed by the Spirit. And so that from that moment, I've never been outside of the umbrella grace of God. Thank God.
Yeah, yeah, and then the Lord has blessed you with a talent and an art of photography, and has taken you, I'm sure, on, as we've heard today, just on so many journeys with that as well. So what are some projects that you're working on right now? I know that you've started a podcast, and I know that it's got some really cool people. And how, first off, how do people go check out your podcast?
The podcast is called The Photo Untaken, and you can just find it by going to thephotountaken.com. And also just to my website, AlanClarkPhotography.com. There's actually a tab just for the podcast. I also have a tab for photo coaching, which is something I started it's funny I say in this last year, but I've been doing this for so long. I've coached so many careers with photography, just, loving people and being supportive and giving advice. And I mean, from contracts to lighting tips and stuff like that. So I decided this last year, instead of, for a while, I was on the sidelines watching this stuff through social media and everyone else doing all these photo tips and being influencers and all this kind of stuff. And I was a hater. I trolled a couple of times, but mainly the things that I think the thing that I was doing, I was sitting on the sidelines and just kind of complaining about watching the game. And I finally decided a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get in the game. I'm doing a masterclass with a lot of my mentors, like Sam, that was on my podcast. My George Nabichi out of he's Japanese, a friend of mine. We met at Sam's class actually in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and now George has started doing workshops in Japan, and he's also a photographer too. And so he's doing this, and I'm thankful that he's doing this because Japan is just a whole different part of the world that would be amazing if there were more. And there's just not a lot of workshops in Japan. There's a few, but there's not really good ones, really well-run workshops. And so George is taking this on, and he's doing workshops with Greg Gorman and Arthur Meyerson and Sam Abel, a lot of my mentors, a lot of my heroes. And so he's made us all part of this thing called Evenings with the Masters, and that's coming up. It actually starts in just a week or so, but you can go. I've put plenty of links on all of my social media platforms for that, and if you can include a link, that'd be awesome too for this. It's coming up soon, and I think I can't remember how much it is, but it's filling up quick. Like he's almost sold it out. I think he has 80 seats, I think is the max, and he's over halfway there now. And it's literally, I think, 17 of the master photographers that are still with us, and amazing photographers. And there's going to be an evening with each one of us. And I believe mine is, I want to say mine's May the 20th, Wednesday, May 20th. I think that's the date, but you can check that. It's that week for sure. And that'll be my class. And so it's just an honor to be, how you hear that Oscars all the time. It's just an honor to be nominated, And it's true. I get why they say that, because to me, these are some of my. This is an Oscar for me, Yes. And it's gotten to a point where I've even coached some of my heroes too. These guys. Most people, like I told you, like earlier in our pre-interview, I just said, everybody just needs a friend, because from a friend comes advice, and that's kind of what this is sometimes. And I've even been able to give like advice to some of my mentors, which is insane. Like never thought in a million years I'd be doing that, or even considered a master or a teacher or anything in that form. I just, you know what I mean? I mean, they've gone from being a bad student to a teacher. That's insane.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and share. I hope stories like Alan's inspires you to share your story, because we all have a story that's worth sharing.